The night my daughter-in-law threw me out, she made sure I left with nothing. No money, no house, no dignity. She even laughed when she checked my suitcase. But what she didn't realize was that everything she thought she had stolen was already inside it. I used to believe that a home could hold a family together, not just with walls and furniture, but with memories. Laughter in the kitchen, quiet mornings with coffee, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway at night. I believed that if you built a life carefully enough, patiently enough, it would last. For 43 years, I lived that belief. My name is Margaret Hale, and until recently, I thought I had done everything right. I married young, not out of desperation, but out of certainty. My husband, Richard, wasn't a wealthy man, but he was steady, reliable, the kind of man who fixed things instead of replacing them, the kind who stayed. We didn't inherit anything. Everything we had, we built ourselves, piece by piece. The house especially. It wasn't large, but it was ours. Every wall carried a story. Every scratch on the wooden floor had a memory attached to it. When our son Daniel was born, that house became more than just a place to live. It became proof. Proof that we had made something that would outlast us. Daniel grew up in that house. He took his first steps in the living room, right near the old window that never quite closed properly in winter. He used to run down the hallway every morning, his laughter echoing through the walls like music. I remember thinking, back then, that no matter what happened in life, family would always remain. I was wrong. Richard passed away 2 years ago. It was quiet. Too quiet. A heart attack on a Tuesday morning while he was trimming the hedges in the backyard. One moment he was there, humming to himself like he always did, and the next, everything was gone. The house didn't feel like a home after that. It felt like an echo. But Daniel stayed close. Or at least, that's what I told myself. He and his wife, Sophia, had moved in shortly after the funeral. "So you won't be alone, Mom," he said. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Sophia was polite. That's the word I used whenever people asked about her. Polite, but distant. Careful with her words. Always composed. She never raised her voice, never argued openly. But there was something in the way she looked at things, at the house, at the furniture, at me, that made me feel like I was being assessed, measured, as if I were part of an arrangement she hadn't quite agreed to. At first, the changes were small. Dinner time shifted. The television programs I used to watch in the evenings were replaced with hers. My favorite chair in the living room slowly became Daniel's spot. Little things. Things that are easy to ignore if you tell yourself they don't matter. And I did tell myself that. Because that's what mothers do. We adjust. We make space. We convince ourselves that discomfort is just another form of love. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's the beginning of something else entirely. I remember the exact moment I first felt it clearly. It was a Sunday evening. We were sitting at the dinner table, the same table Richard had built with his own hands 20 years earlier. Sophia placed a dish down gently, then looked around the room. Not at us. At the house. Her eyes moved slowly, thoughtfully, like someone walking through a property they were considering buying. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, but it didn't feel warm. "This house," she said softly, "is really too big for just one person, don't you think?" I didn't answer right away, but something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for me to realize that I was no longer living in my home. I was living in someone else's plan. The next few days passed quietly. Too quietly. Nothing dramatic happened. No arguments. No raised voices. But something in the house had shifted, like a door had been left slightly open somewhere, letting in a draft you couldn't quite locate. Sophia didn't mention the comment again. Not directly. But I began to notice the way she moved through the house after that night. Slower. More deliberate. As if she were seeing everything differently now, not as a guest, but as someone taking inventory. She started asking small questions. Harmless ones, on the surface. "Margaret, do you remember when the roof was last repaired? Are the property taxes paid yearly or quarterly? Did Richard handle all the accounts himself?" Each question was delivered with the same gentle tone, the same polite smile. But they didn't feel like conversation. They felt like preparation. Daniel, on the other hand, became quieter. He still kissed my cheek in the morning, still asked if I needed anything when he came home from work. But there was a distance in his eyes now, a hesitation, like he was carefully choosing what not to say. One evening, I found him standing alone in the kitchen, staring at a set of documents spread across the counter. He quickly gathered them when he noticed me. Just work stuff, he said. I nodded, pretending to believe him. Because sometimes, the truth isn't something people tell you. It's something they try to hide. A few days later, Sophia brought it up again. This time, at dinner. The three of us sat at the table. The same table Richard had built. The same table where we had celebrated birthdays, holidays, ordinary evenings that once felt so full of life. Sophia set down her fork carefully. I've been thinking, she said, her voice light, almost casual, about what we talked about the other night. Daniel didn't look up. I folded my napkin slowly and placed it beside my plate. What about it? I asked. She smiled. That the house might be too much for you now. There it was again. Not a suggestion. A conclusion. I've managed it for over 40 years, I replied calmly. Yes, of course, she said quickly. And you've done an amazing job. Truly. There was a pause. Then she leaned slightly forward. But things change. Daniel shifted in his seat. I glanced at him. He kept his eyes on his plate. Sophia continued. Maintenance, taxes, utilities, it's a lot for one person. And we just want what's best for you. We. That word landed heavier than the rest. And what exactly is best for me? I asked. Her smile didn't fade. Well, she said, we've been looking into some options. Options. The word felt carefully chosen. There are some very nice communities nearby. Comfortable. Safe. People your age. I stared at her. She said it so gently, so reasonably, as if she were offering me something generous, not taking something away. And this house? I asked quietly. Sophia's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then she said, it wouldn't make sense to keep it empty. Empty. I almost smiled at that, because I was still sitting right there, still breathing, still living inside these walls. And yet, somehow in her mind, I was already gone. That night, I lay awake longer than usual. The house was silent, but it wasn't the same kind of silence I had known after Richard passed. This one felt different, heavier, like something was approaching, slowly, carefully, and for the first time, I allowed myself to consider a possibility I had been avoiding. This wasn't concern. This wasn't care. This was a plan, and I was at the center of it. The documents appeared 3 days later. Not suddenly, not dramatically. They were introduced the way everything else had been. Carefully, gently, as if nothing about them should raise concern. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sunlight stretched across the living room floor in long, quiet lines, and I was sitting in my usual chair with a book I hadn't really been reading. Sophia walked in holding a slim folder. Margaret, she said softly, do you have a minute? I closed the book. Of course. She sat across from me, placing the folder neatly on the coffee table between us. Her movements were precise, almost rehearsed. Daniel followed a moment later, lingering near the doorway instead of sitting down. That was the first thing I noticed. He didn't want to be part of this, but he was there anyway. Sophia opened the folder and turned it toward me. It's just some paperwork, she said. Nothing complicated. I looked down. Several pages. Clean. Official looking. Typed neatly, with places marked for signatures. What kind of paperwork? I asked. She smiled. Just authorization forms. In case anything ever happens. So we can help manage things for you. Manage. Such a harmless word. And why would you need to manage anything? I asked. Her expression didn't change. It's just practical, she said. You never know what the future holds. I glanced at Daniel. He still hadn't moved. Daniel, I said quietly, still silent. Trust. Such a simple word. And yet, in that moment, it felt like a test. Not of them. Of me. Because if I said yes, then everything that followed would be my own doing. I placed the papers back on the table. I'd like some time to review these, I said. Just one sentence. Simple. Reasonable. But the air in the room changed instantly. Sophia's smile tightened, just slightly. Daniel finally stepped forward. Mom, it's nothing serious, he said quickly. You don't need to overthink it. Overthink. I almost laughed. 43 years of building a life. And now I was being told not to think too much about handing it over. I'm not refusing, I said calmly. Just taking my time. Sophia nodded slowly. Of course, she said. But her tone had shifted. The warmth was still there. But now it felt thinner. That evening, I sat alone at the dining table long after they had gone upstairs. The folder lay open in front of me. The pages still waiting. The pen beside them untouched. I traced my fingers lightly over the lines where my name was printed. Margaret Hale. It looked so small, so easily transferred. so easily replaced. And for the first time, I didn't just feel uneasy. I felt certain. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't about the future. This was about control. And whatever I chose to do next would decide everything that came after. I didn't sign the papers that night. I left them exactly where Sophia had placed them, neatly aligned on the dining table, the pen resting beside them like a quiet invitation I had chosen to ignore. But something else changed. Not in the house. In me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Old habits. For years, Richard and I had shared quiet mornings together. Coffee, newspaper, the soft hum of the world slowly waking up outside our windows. Now it was just me. But that morning, the silence felt different. Clearer. As if something had finally come into focus. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder again. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I reached for my phone. There was a number I hadn't dialed in years. Mr. Carter, our family lawyer. Richard trusted him. That alone was enough for me. Margaret, his voice sounded surprised when he answered. It's been a long time. Yes, I said quietly. It has. There was a brief pause. Then he asked the question I hadn't realized I needed to hear. Is everything all right? I looked at the folder, at the signatures waiting for me, and for the first time, I didn't try to soften the truth. No, I said, and that single word changed everything. An hour later, I was sitting in his office. The same office Richard and I had visited years ago when we first organized our estate. Back then, it had felt like planning for something distant. Now it felt immediate. Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses and reviewed the documents carefully, page by page, line by line. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. And the longer he stayed silent, the heavier the room felt. Finally, he placed the papers down. Did you sign these? He asked. No. Have you agreed to sign them? No. He nodded slowly. Then he leaned back in his chair. These are not just authorization forms, Margaret. I already knew that. But hearing it out loud made it real. They grant extensive control, he continued. Financial, legal, and potentially permanent. Permanent. The word lingered in the air. What would happen, I asked quietly, if I signed them? He met my eyes. You would be giving them the ability to make decisions on your behalf. And the house. A pause. They could position themselves to take ownership. Position. Such a careful way of saying something much more dangerous. I felt no shock. No panic. Just clarity. The kind that arrives too late for most people. Is there a way to protect myself? I asked. Mr. Carter didn't hesitate. Yes. That one word felt like a door opening. What followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional. It was precise, careful, deliberate. We reviewed everything. Accounts, property, legal standing. Things Richard had set up years ago, things I had almost forgotten. And one by one, we made changes. Quietly, legally, irreversibly. By the time I left his office, the folder in my hands looked the same. The same pages. The same empty signature lines. But everything behind those pages had changed. That evening, I returned home. Sophia was in the living room. Daniel sat beside her. They both looked up as I walked in. There was something in their expressions. Expectation. Anticipation. As if they had already decided what I would do. Did you have time to look over the documents? Sophia asked gently. I placed the folder on the table, opened it, picked up the pen, and for a moment, I let the silence stretch. Then I signed. One page, then another, then the last. Slowly, carefully, without hesitation. Sophia's smile returned. Wider this time. Daniel exhaled quietly, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. I closed the folder and handed it back to her. There you go, I said softly. Sophia took it, her fingers tightening slightly around the edges. Thank you, Margaret, she said. Her voice was warm again. Satisfied. I simply nodded. No anger. No resistance. No questions. Because sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to let people believe exactly what they want, right before everything changes. It happened faster than I expected. Not the tension, not the distance. Those had been building for weeks. What surprised me was how quickly politeness disappeared once they believed everything was theirs. The change began the very next morning. Sophia didn't greet me. No good morning, no polite smile. She walked past me in the kitchen as if I were part of the furniture, something that existed but didn't require acknowledgement. Daniel followed shortly after. He hesitated, just for a second, when he saw me standing by the sink. "Morning, Mom," he said, but the warmth was gone, replaced by something else, something careful, measured. By the afternoon, the house no longer felt like mine. Not in small ways, in obvious ones. I found my things moved, not packed, just relocated. My books, once neatly arranged in the living room, were stacked in a box near the hallway. My favorite chair, the one Richard used to tease me about, had been replaced. Not removed, just taken over. Sophia sat in it that evening, scrolling through her phone, as if it had always belonged to her. I didn't say anything. I simply watched. Because now, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was confirming. That night, during dinner, the conversation finally arrived. No build-up, no careful wording, just the truth, spoken plainly. Sophia set her fork down and looked at me. "Margaret," she said, "we should talk about next steps." Next steps. I folded my napkin slowly. "What kind of steps?" I asked. Daniel shifted beside her. He didn't look at me. Sophia leaned forward slightly. "Now that everything is settled," she said, "it's probably time to think about your living situation." There it was. No more pretending. "I'm living here," I replied calmly. She smiled. Not kindly. Not this time. "Yes," she said. "For now." For now? Two small words. Sharp enough to cut. Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, we just think it might be better if you had a place that's more suitable." Suitable. The same language. The same script. But now, there was no softness left. Only intent. "And this house?" I asked. Sophia answered immediately. "It makes more sense for us to manage it moving forward." Manage. Control. Own. Different words. Same meaning. The silence stretched between us. Heavy. Final. "When?" I asked. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then said, "Soon." Sophia corrected him. "Tonight." The word landed without warning. Even Daniel looked surprised. "Sophia," he started. But she didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me. Calm. Certain. Unmoving. "It's better not to drag these things out," she said. "We've already made arrangements." Arrangements. Of course she had. "You'll take what you need," she continued. "Clothes. Personal items." She gestured lightly toward the hallway. "One suitcase should be enough." One suitcase. 43 years of life. Reduced to that. I looked at Daniel. My son. The boy who used to run down these halls. The man who now sat in silence while someone else decided where I would sleep that night. "Is this what you want?" I asked him quietly. For a moment. Just a moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. Guilt. Memory. Then it was gone. He nodded. Barely. But enough. And just like that, it was decided. I stood up slowly. No shouting. No tears. No pleading. Because the moment I had feared had already passed. This wasn't betrayal anymore. It was confirmation. "I understand," I said softly. Sophia gave a small, satisfied nod. I walked toward my room. Each step steady. Each breath controlled. Behind me, I could feel it. Relief. Not mine. Theirs. They thought it was over. They thought I had lost. They had no idea that everything they believed they had taken from me was already out of their reach. I didn't pack much. There wasn't much I needed to pack. At least, not the things they thought mattered. I walked into my bedroom and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I stood still. The room looked exactly the same. The same curtains Richard had insisted on keeping, even when they faded. The same dresser, slightly scratched at the corners. The same bed where we had spent decades talking about everything and nothing. And yet, it no longer felt like mine. I opened the closet slowly. Clothes hung neatly, untouched. I reached for a few simple things: blouses, a coat, a pair of shoes. Nothing expensive, nothing sentimental, just enough to make it believable. The suitcase sat at the bottom of the closet. Old, worn, the same one Richard and I had used years ago when we traveled to the coast for our anniversary. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed, unzipped it, and began packing. Outside the room, I could hear faint movement. Sophia's voice, low, controlled, giving instructions. Daniel's footsteps pacing back and forth, restless, uneasy. I paused for a moment, then walked to the dresser, opened the top drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of neatly folded scarves, was something they had never bothered to look for. A small leather envelope. Plain, unremarkable, easy to overlook. I picked it up and held it in my hands. For a second, I thought of Richard, of the way he used to say, asterisk, always prepare quietly. You never know when you'll need it. Asterisk. I slipped the envelope into the suitcase, carefully, beneath the clothes. Then I continued packing, slowly, methodically, like someone who had all the time in the world. When I was done, I closed the suitcase and zipped it shut. It didn't look like much. Just clothes. Just the bare minimum. Exactly what they expected. I took one last look around the room. Not with sadness, not with regret, but with clarity. Then I picked up the suitcase and walked out. Sophia was waiting in the hallway, leaning slightly against the wall, arms crossed, watching, evaluating. That's it? She asked, glancing at the suitcase. I nodded. That's all I need. She stepped forward and reached for the handle. Do you mind? She said, though it wasn't really a question. I let go. She opened the suitcase right there in the hallway. No hesitation. No shame. Clothes. Folded neatly. Nothing else. She shifted a few items around, checking beneath them, then closed it again, a small smile forming at the corner of her lips. Satisfied. All right, she said lightly. That should be fine. Daniel stood a few feet away, watching, not speaking. For a moment, our eyes met, and in that brief silence, I saw it. Not cruelty, not anger, just weakness. He looked away first. Sophia stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Well, she said, I suppose this is goodbye. Goodbye. Such a simple word. For something that wasn't simple at all. I picked up the suitcase again, walked past her, past Daniel, past the walls that had once held my entire life. No one stopped me. No one called my name. The door opened. Cool air rushed in. And just like that, I stepped outside. Behind me, the door closed. Firm. Final. They thought they had taken everything. My home. My security. My place in their lives. But as I walked down the quiet street, the suitcase steady in my hand, I allowed myself a small, almost invisible smile. Because everything that truly mattered was right there with me. And they had never even seen it. The hotel room was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe, I had just grown used to larger spaces. Either way, it didn't matter. I placed the suitcase gently on the bed. The room was quiet. Too quiet for someone who had just lost everything. But I didn't feel lost. Not anymore. I locked the door, turned the handle twice, just to be sure, then walked back toward the bed and sat down beside the suitcase. For a moment, I simply looked at it. Old, ordinary, exactly what they had seen. Then I reached forward and slowly unzipped it. The sound was soft, but in that silence, it felt loud. Final. On top, just as Sophia had seen, were neatly folded clothes. Nothing unusual, nothing valuable, nothing worth taking. I lifted them out one by one, carefully, deliberately, placing them beside me on the bed. And then, it appeared. The leather envelope. Still exactly where I had placed it. Untouched. Unnoticed. I picked it up and held it in my hands. For a brief moment, I closed my eyes. Not in sadness. In memory. Richard. He had always been quiet about important things. Never dramatic. Never careless. Never keep everything in one place, he used to say. And never let anyone see what matters most. I opened the envelope. Inside were documents. Not copies. Not drafts. Originals. Property deeds. Bank access authorizations. Trust agreements. Everything. Not just the house. Not just the accounts. Everything that had ever been ours. I placed the documents gently on the bed and looked at them. Each page. Each signature. Each decision we had made over the years. Sophia thought she had taken control. She believed the papers I signed had given her power. But those papers were never the ones that mattered. Weeks ago, before the first conversation, before the first suggestion, before the first carefully chosen word, I had already moved everything. Quietly, legally, completely. The house, no longer mine. Not anymore. Not because I gave it to them, but because I transferred it into a trust they couldn't touch. The accounts? Separated, protected, untouchable without my authorization. Even the signatures they thought they had. Limited, conditional, useless without the documents sitting right in front of me now. I let out a slow breath. Not relief. Not quite. Clarity. Because now, for the first time since Richard passed, Everything was exactly where it needed to be. There was a soft knock on the door. I didn't move right away. I already knew who it would be. Mr. Carter. Right on time. I gathered the documents, slid them back into the envelope, and stood. The balance was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not a delay. Not a system error. Empty. She refreshed the page. Once. Twice. 3 times. Still empty. Her expression didn't change immediately, but something in her posture shifted. Tension. Sharp. Controlled. Daniel, she called, her voice calm. Too calm. He walked in, still half asleep. What's wrong? She turned the phone toward him. Look. He leaned closer. His brow furrowed. That's not right. No, she said quietly. It's not. They checked another account. Then another. Each one the same. Nothing. Not transferred. Not frozen. Gone. Daniel straightened. That's impossible, he said. Sophia didn't answer. She was already moving. Laptop open. Documents pulled out. The folder I had signed. She flipped through the pages quickly. Searching. Confirming. Everything was there. Every signature. Every clause. Every line exactly as she expected. And yet, nothing worked. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. Try the property records, Daniel said. She did. Minutes passed. Then, no, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. What? She turned the screen toward him. The ownership had changed. Not to them. Not to me. To something else. A trust. Date of transfer. 3 weeks ago. Daniel stared at the screen. That's before. Yes, Sophia said. Before the conversation. Before the pressure. Before the signatures. Before everything. The room felt colder. She knew, Daniel said quietly. Sophia didn't respond. Because she already understood. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. Planned. Executed. Perfectly. She reached for the folder again. This time, slower. More careful. Reading. Not skimming. And then she saw it. A clause. Buried deep within the document. Conditional authority. Limited access. Subject to prior legal structures. Meaning. They had signed nothing of value. Nothing that gave them control. Nothing that mattered. The silence in the kitchen stretched. For the first time since I had known her, Sophia looked uncertain. Not defeated. Not yet. But shaken. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. What do we do? He asked. Sophia closed the folder. Slowly. Carefully. Then she looked toward the front door. As if she could still see me walking away. And for the first time, there was no smile. Only realization. They hadn't taken anything from me. They had only revealed themselves. And now, they were standing in a house they thought they owned. With nothing beneath their feet. Sophia didn't panic. Not immediately. That wasn't who she was. Panic was messy, loud, uncontrolled. Sophia preferred something else. Control, even when things slipped. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the folder still in her hands, her expression calm again, too calm. Then she turned to Daniel. Call her. Daniel hesitated. Maybe we should. Call her, she repeated. Not louder, just firmer. He swallowed and reached for his phone. His fingers hovered over my name for a second longer than necessary. Then he pressed it. It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. No answer. She's not picking up, he said. Sophia didn't react. Again. He did. Same result. This time, he didn't speak. He just lowered the phone slowly. Sophia exhaled softly. Then, without another word, she walked past him. Where are you going? Daniel asked. To fix this. An hour later, they stood outside the hotel. Not because they knew I was there. Not exactly. But because Sophia had started connecting the pieces. The timing. The transfer. The silence. She didn't believe in coincidence. Are you sure? Daniel asked quietly. She didn't answer. She was already walking inside. I saw them before they saw me. From across the lobby. Daniel looked uneasy. Tense. Out of place. Sophia looked focused. Not angry. Not desperate. Calculating. Always calculating. I remained seated. Still. Waiting. It didn't take long. Her eyes scanned the room once. Twice. Then stopped. On me. For a brief moment. Everything froze. Recognition. Shock. Understanding. all at once. Then she walked toward me. Slow. Controlled. Daniel followed. Less steady. They stopped just a few feet away. No greetings. No smiles. Just silence. You knew, Sophia said. Not a question. A statement. I looked up at her calmly. Yes, I replied. Daniel's breath caught slightly. You planned this, he asked. I met his eyes. I prepared. Sophia tilted her head slightly, studying me again. But this time, not as something to control, as something she had underestimated. You transferred everything before signing, she said. Yes. And the documents are valid, I said gently, but not in the way you expected. The silence stretched between us. For the first time, Sophia didn't have the next move. Daniel stepped forward slightly. Mom, we didn't. I raised a hand. Not harsh, not angry, just enough to stop him. You don't need to explain, I said, because explanations were for accidents. This was a choice. Sophia's voice came again, quieter now. What do you want? I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, without illusion. I wanted a family, I said. A pause. Then I added softly. But that's no longer an option. Daniel's shoulders dropped. Sophia didn't move. Still standing, still composed. But something had changed. The certainty was gone. And in its place was something far more unfamiliar to her. Uncertainty. Because for the first time in this entire situation, she wasn't in control anymore. And she knew it. Daniel was the first to break. Not Sophia. Not me. Mom, please, he said, his voice unsteady now. We can fix this. Fix. Such a small word. As if everything that had happened could be adjusted, rearranged, softened into something acceptable. I looked at him. Really looked. And for a moment, I didn't see the man standing in front of me. I saw the boy. The one who used to run toward me when he was afraid of thunderstorms. The one who used to believe I could solve anything. But that boy was gone. And the man in front of me had made his choice. There's nothing to fix, I said quietly. Sophia stepped forward then. Not emotional. Not pleading. Strategic. This doesn't have to become complicated, she said. I almost smiled. Because it already was. We may have misunderstood certain things, she continued. But we can still come to an agreement. Agreement. Not apology. I tilted my head slightly. What kind of agreement? I asked. Her eyes sharpened just a fraction. She thought she had found an opening. The house, she said. We've already settled in. Daniel's work is nearby. It makes sense for us to stay. Of course it did. For them. And in return, she added, we can make sure you're comfortable. Financially. Wherever you choose to go. There it was. Not remorse. Not regret. A transaction. Daniel glanced at her, then back at me. Mom, it's just temporary, he said quickly. Until we figure things out. Temporary. I let the word settle. Then I stood up slowly. Neither of them moved. You're asking me, I said calmly, to give you what you tried to take. Sophia didn't flinch. We're asking for a solution, she corrected. I held her gaze. No, I said softly. You're asking for control. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Daniel stepped closer. This doesn't have to go further, he said. We're family. Family. The word echoed. Empty. I reached into my bag. Not the suitcase. Just a small folder I had brought with me. I placed it gently on the table between us. Sophia's eyes flickered. What is that? She asked. Reality, I said. She opened it. Inside. Legal documents. Official. Stamped. Final. Her expression didn't change at first. Then it did. A notice. Filed that morning. Fraud investigation. Attempted coercion. Unauthorized financial manipulation. Daniel stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. His face drained of color. Mom, what is this? He whispered. I met his eyes. This, I said calmly, is what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. Sophia closed the folder slowly. Too slowly. For the first time, her control slipped. You're threatening us? She asked. No, I replied. I'm protecting myself. A pause. Then I added. And correcting a mistake. Daniel shook his head slightly. This will ruin everything, he said. I looked at him. Yes, I said. It will. Because some things, once broken, don't get repaired. They get revealed. And now, everything was out in the open. No more pretending. No more polite conversations. Just consequences. Exactly where they belonged. Daniel sat down. Not because he wanted to. Because his legs could no longer hold him. The chair behind him scraped softly against the floor as he lowered himself into it, his eyes still fixed on the documents in Sophia's hands. This isn't necessary, he said, though his voice no longer carried conviction. Sophia didn't sit. She remained standing, still, rigid. But I could see it now. The shift. Not in her posture, not in her expression, in her eyes. For the first time, there was something unfamiliar there. Not calculation, not control. Fear. You filed this already? She asked quietly. Yes. And you're willing to go through with it? I didn't answer immediately. Because this wasn't about willingness anymore. It was about consequence. You already went through with your part, I said calmly. Silence. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. Mom, please, he said again, softer now. We made a mistake. A mistake. I looked at him. No, I said. You made a decision. He flinched slightly. Sophia finally moved. Just one step forward. If this goes public, she said, her voice measured again, though thinner now, it won't just affect us. I raised an eyebrow. It will affect your son, she continued. His career. His reputation. There it was. Not guilt. Not remorse. Leverage. Daniel looked up quickly. Sophia. But she didn't stop. And you, she added, turning her gaze back to me. Do you really want to drag your own family into something like this? Family. She used the word like a shield. Like it still meant something. I stepped closer. Slowly. Do you remember, I asked quietly, what you said to me the night you told me to leave? She didn't answer. Pack your things. Tonight. My voice didn't rise. Didn't harden. But it didn't soften either. You didn't hesitate, I continued. You didn't consider my age, my history, my place in that house. A pause. You didn't think about family then. Daniel lowered his head. Sophia said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. The truth doesn't argue. It stands. Unmoving. I'm not destroying this family, I said. Another pause. It was already gone. The words settled into the space between us. Heavy. Final. Daniel's shoulders trembled slightly. Not visibly, but enough. Is there anything we can do? He asked. The question hung there. Fragile. For a moment. Just a moment. Something inside me shifted. Not weakness. Memory. But memory isn't enough to rebuild what's been broken. And I knew that now. There is, I said. Both of them looked up. Hope. Quick. Desperate. I held their gaze. Then said calmly. You can face what you've done. Silence. No negotiation. No conditions. Just truth. Because sometimes, the hardest punishment isn't losing everything. It's having to live with it. No one spoke after that. Not immediately. Because there was nothing left to negotiate. Daniel stared at the table, his hands still clasped together as if holding on to something that had already slipped away. Sophia remained standing, but the stillness around her was different now. It wasn't control anymore. It was containment. I picked up my bag. Slowly. Calmly. Neither of them tried to stop me. Is this it? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because some endings deserve to be acknowledged. Yes, I said. The word landed softly, but it carried everything. Daniel stood up abruptly. Mom, please. Don't walk away like this. Like this. I turned to look at him. How should I walk away? I asked gently. He didn't answer, because there was no better version of this. Sophia finally spoke again, but this time, there was no strategy behind it. No control. Margaret, she said, quieter than I had ever heard her. I waited. But the rest of the sentence never came. Because some words don't arrive when they're needed. They arrive too late. Or not at all. I nodded once. Not in forgiveness. Not in acceptance. Just acknowledgement. Then I walked toward the door. Each step steady. Measured. Final. Behind me, I heard Daniel take a step forward. Then stop. He didn't call out again. Because somewhere deep down, he understood. The door opened. The same way it had the night I left the house. But this time, It felt different. That night, I had walked out with nothing. Or at least, that's what they believed. Now, I walked away with everything that mattered. Not the house, not the money, but clarity, dignity, choice. Outside, the air felt lighter. I didn't look back, because there was nothing behind me anymore. No home, no family, just a past that had already closed its door. Weeks later, the case moved forward, quietly, efficiently. There were consequences, legal ones, financial ones, reputational ones. I didn't attend most of it. I didn't need to. Some things don't require your presence to be resolved. I heard updates from Mr. Carter. Brief, factual. They've settled. Assets frozen. Investigation concluded. Each sentence simple, complete. And with each one, the distance between my old life and my new one grew wider. I moved into a smaller place. Nothing extravagant, nothing impressive. But it was mine. Entirely. No one questioned my presence. No one measured my worth. The mornings were quiet again. But not empty. Peaceful. One evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, I thought about the house. About Richard. About everything we had built. And for the first time, I didn't feel loss. I felt something else. Release. Because in the end, they didn't take my home. They revealed that it was never mine to keep. And in doing so, they gave me something far more valuable. A reason to walk away. And the strength to never look back.